Hi everyone, it's Ian here from Crack Maths and welcome to tutorial 63 on how to estimate the mean from a grouped frequency table. The best way to get started with this topic is to look at a question. So here's question 1 and it says estimate the mean length from the grouped frequency table below. So this is called a grouped frequency table because we've got our values here for lengths and the lengths have been grouped together. And then what we have is we've got our column which tells us the frequency, which tells us how many data items, whether it was people or plants or whatever it was, fell into this interval. So for this table, I can see I've got the lengths which have been written 50 to 55, 55 to 60, 60 to 65, and 65 to 70. And by each of those lengths, what I can see is I've got 12 people for 50 to 55. I've got 14 people for 55 to 60. I've got 5 people by 60 to 65. And I've got 9 people in the 65 to 70 row. What that means is that if I was writing all of this data out in a list, there would be 12 values that fell between 50 and 55. There'd be 14 values that fell between 55 and 60. There'd be 5 values that fell between 60 and 65. And then there'd be 9 values that fell between 65 and 70. If we had all those values and we wanted to calculate the mean, we would then add all of them together and divide them by the number of values that we have in total. Actually, at this point, I will just work out the number of values that we have. We've got 12 values plus 14 values, so that makes 26. Then I've got 5 values there, so that takes up to 31. And then I've got 9 values in the last row. So I've got 40 pieces of data here. That's what this table is saying. I've collected the results for 40 pieces of data, so the lengths from 40 things. If I wanted to calculate the mean the normal way, I'd have to add up all of those lengths and then I could divide it by 40, because remember, the mean is equal to everything added together divided by the number of things. However, because this data has been given to us in the frequency table, I don't actually know any of the values. And that's where this word estimate comes in. So the question says estimate the mean from a grouped frequency table. So I've got to estimate because I don't know what any of the values are. All I know is that they fall in these intervals. So the way that we combat that is we use midpoints. So we assume that all of these, say for example the 50 to 55, all of the values in the 50 to 55 row, those 12 values are all going to be the exact midpoint between 50 and 55. I mean, it's a good method because they might be higher, they might be lower, but it is likely that they would average out at that. So the way that we calculate this is we do the lower interval, add the upper interval, and then we divide it by 2. So 50 add 55 equals 105. 105 divided by 2 is 52.5. So therefore, I'm going to, instead of thinking about this interval width, I'm going to just think about the fact that these 12 values are all 52.5 millimeters. Now, if I then think about that, this row then tells me I have 12 values that are 52.5 millimeters. So if I wanted to do my root 1, where I added them all together, I would just add 52.5 together 12 times. Now, we all know that that would take a long time. And rather than doing 52.5 add 52.5 add 52.5 12 times, what we can do is we can just do 52.5 times 12. So I'm going to put that next to the row here. And to say 52.5 times 12, I'm going to write that that equals 630. So what I now know is that those 12 pieces of data that are all estimated at being 52.5 millimeters, together they all add up to 630 millimeters. So those 12 people equate for 630 millimeters. So the next row we've got 55 to 60. So again, I'm going to estimate the midpoint in the same way. So I'm going to do 55 add 60, so that's going to be 115. 115 divided by 2 equals 57.5. So there we go. I'm estimating that these 14 values are all 57.5. Now I'm going to do 14 times 57.5, and that equals 805. So all of these 14 values add up to 805 millimeters. So we've now got the 12 values at the top add up to 630. The 14 values on this row add up to 805. The next row, we've got 60 to 65. So I'm going to do the same thing again to find my midpoint. 60 add 65 equals 125. 125 divided by 2 is 62.5. So 62.5 times 5, because we've got 5 of them, that's going to give me 312.5. So now we've got 630, 805, and 312. Now lastly, we've got this last row. Okay, so I'm going to think about the midpoint for this. So remember, I'm going to do 65 add 70, which gives us 135. 135 divided by 2 equals 67.5. So 67.5 times 9 gives us 607.5. So now we know that the 12 in the first row add up to 630, the 14 in the second row add up to 805, the 5 in the third row add up to 312, and the 9 in the last row add up to 607.5. So remember, the mean is everything added together divided by the number of things. So we need to now add up these 12, 14, 5, and 9 things all together. So to do that, what we're adding up, we're actually adding up the 630, add the 805, add the 312.5, add the 607.5. So if I add all of these up together, we have added up all of our estimates for the length. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to do that on my calculator because these numbers are getting quite large. And what we get is we get that equals 2,355. So everything added together equals 2,355. Now what we need to do is we need to divide it by the number of things that we've added. So the number of things that we've added is we've added 12 lots of 52, 14 lots of 57, 5 lots of 62, and 9 lots of 67. So we've added 40 things together. So my mean is going to be everything added together, which is the 2,355 things, divided by the number of things, which is actually 40. We've added together 40 pieces of data. So now we can simply calculate the mean. So 2,355 divided by 40 equals 58.875 millimeters. Because remember, we've estimated the mean length, so the mean length will be in millimeters. Okay, great. Right, let's have a go at another question. Okay, right, so here we go. This is a bit of a nicer table. It's a little bit smaller. And it says, estimate the mean of the values in the frequency table. So we've got our frequency table this time. And this says countries visited up here. And we've got the intervals 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 30. And then next to that, we've got our frequencies. So we can see on this table that 5 people have visited 0 to 10 countries, that 12 people have visited 10 to 20 countries, and that 3 people have visited 20 to 30 countries. So remember, this question says estimate the mean because we don't actually have any exact values, so that's why it's an estimate. There's no rounding or anything here. We're just estimating the mean because we don't know any of the exact values. So let's find out the midpoints. So the midpoints for the first one, we're going to do 0 add 10 equals 10. 10 divided by 2 equals 5. So our estimate for the number of countries visited for the first row will be 5. Okay, we can now see that 5 people visited that, so 5 times 5 is 25. So we're going to estimate that those 5 people in this first row have collectively visited 25 countries. Right, row 2. So we've got our midpoint, which is going to be 10 add 20, which gives us 30. 30 divided by 2 is 15. So our estimate for the number of countries visited for this second row is 15 per person. There's 12 people on this row, so that means we've got to do 12 lots of 15. So 12 times 15 equals 180. So therefore, we're estimating that this second row, the people on this second row have collectively visited 180 countries. Now let's do the third row. So the third row says 20 to 30 countries. So let's add those together, which makes 50. 50 divided by 2 is 25. So we're going to estimate each of these 3 people have visited 25 countries. So then we're going to do 25 times 3, and so that will give us 75. So we're going to say collectively those 3 people visited 75 countries. Now what we can do is we can add up the countries visited by everyone. So we've got 25 add 180 makes 205. 205 add 75 equals 280. So collectively, they've all visited 280 countries. So that is our everything added together. Now, we need to work out how many bits of data we added together. Well, we added together 5 pieces of data for row 1, 12 pieces of data for row 2, and 3 pieces of data for row 3. So 5 add 12 is 17, 17 add 3 is 20. So therefore, we've got 280 countries were visited by 20 people. So remember, the mean equals everything added together divided by the number of things. So the mean is going to be 280 divided by 20. So 280 divided by 20 equals 14. So the estimate of our mean for this frequency table is 14 countries. Great, I'm going to stop there because this topic actually doesn't really change much. So if you want to have a go at the practice and scenario questions over on crackmaths.co.uk, that would be an excellent use of your time. This was tutorial 63, and I will see you in the next tutorial. So long.